Welcome to Shattering Myths, a program devoted to the fastest growing segment of the world's societies, to those who are coming to know that the world's political, religious, media, military, and economic institutions are corrupt, that they are actually counterproductive, and that they cannot be fixed. Our mission, therefore, is to look behind the headlines, to know who is working against our interests, to understand why they are doing so. Because exposing and condemning errant and treacherous schemes isn't hateful. It's actually compassionate. In our concluding hour today, as we normally do, we're going to use evidence and reason to explore the Torah, which means teaching, not law, because it's liberating and empowering covenant. Provides the only reliable answer for you and your family. Our phone number, if you'd like to participate in this discussion anytime over the next 3 hours, is toll-free 877-300-7645. It is my pleasure, as it is every Friday, to welcome one of the most remarkable men I have had the pleasure of knowing, a man I consider to be the foremost scholar in the world on Islam. The man who expresses more courage and compassion for his audience than probably anyone delivering any message to any group of people. And that is because he is willing to stand up, risk his life, and tell you the truth about the demented, destructive, and deadly nature of the Islamic religion. His name is al-Rassooli. He is the author of Lifting the Veil, The True Faces of Muhammad and Islam. Good morning, IQ.
Good morning to you, sir. Thank you for the introduction.
In fact, it's evening for you and afternoon for most people. I forget the fact that we do have listeners around the world. IQ, I sent you an email this morning just to give you a heads up that there is a mini tempest going on now with this program because I said I wanted a complete disassociation from from any site, I should say, that promotes 9/11 conspiracy theories, that the government planned and perpetrated 9/11, that it planned and participated in 9/11, from anything that I say and do. Now, preface that by saying people are free to believe whatever they want. I'm not saying here you can only agree with what you and I have said. People can believe anything they want. What I've just said is that I view the theory that the U.S. government planned and participated in 9/11 to be so irresponsible and so inconsistent with evidence and reason that if what you and I say is associated with it on a website or by individuals, then it is destructive of our credibility and everything we've risked our lives for. What's your opinion on that?
I agree with you. Any human being who associates the American government for the destruction and the Holocaust of 9/11 should be put in a mental asylum. You are very polite, and I don't have to be polite. I don't need to be polite. 19 Muslims did it. There was no conspiracy with the American government. 14 of them, if I remember correctly, were of Saudi Arabia. And they were shouting Allahu Akbar as they slaughtered the Americans. To associate such an attack with the government of the United States of America means they remove Islam of guilt. And that I will never, ever accept. Not because I don't accept it, because it is impossible not to associate Islam with all the destructiveness going around the world today. As we see them every day, 24 hours a day on television. Not only against Americans, not only against Israel, not only against Jews, Hindus, and Buddhists, but against each other. Sunnis against Shia, Shia against Sunnis, and both of them against anybody else of a different sect. Back to you, sir.
I want to disagree with one thing you've said and agree with the rest of it. I understand how people recognize that the United States government should have known that the 9/11 plot was going to take place, because I had read, and you probably have read, Ramzi Yousef's plan that he wrote in the Philippines to perpetrate it, and that the United States government should not have lied to the American people regarding this being one group of Muslims that were not even associated with the religion, who had somehow corrupted their religion, and then going off and invading Afghanistan and Iraq and depriving of Americans of freedom. So in that context, I can see how reasonable people would recognize there's something really nefarious here. And so I would not go so far as to, I wouldn't even go within a million miles of the insane asylum. I would just say that it is unreasonable, and it's dangerous, and it's counterproductive to suggest that the U.S. government participated in and planned 9/11. And I would say that it's unreasonable and counterproductive and destructive of credibility for all the reasons that you have mentioned. That Islam bears sole responsibility for 9/11. Islam bears sole responsibility for 99.9% of terrorist acts that are perpetrated around the world today. Islam bears sole responsibility for what's occurring in Syria, what's occurring in your country, Iraq, the relentless attacks against Israel, and for us to somehow exonerate Islam by blaming the U.S. government for the destruction of its planes and buildings, I think is extraordinarily inappropriate. Particularly when you have so few people like you and I who are willing to risk our lives to tell people the truth. And so that's my concern over this. You've stated yours. Let's move on. There's an article that was written by a man who makes some good points. Eli Hertz is his name. The website is Myths and Facts. He opens with this statement, IQ, and I commented on it yesterday. I'd like your take on his opening statement. He says, when one grasps and this is about he is opposed to the United States approach to the peace process in Israel. So when one grasps the duration of the conflict and its roots, when one fully faces the depth of animosity towards Israel and the anti-Semitism that permeates from, he writes, the Arab world, you and I would not use that term, from the political, religious, and intellectual elites down to the grassroots, the sheer magnitude of the challenge for peacemakers becomes painfully apparent. I had some comments and criticisms of that statement. What would you say about it?
Well, I always found those people who are trying to make peace between the Israelis and the Arabs completely and utterly out of touch with reality. Look, most probably Kerry's intentions are good, but are most definitely totally misguided on all counts, theologically, historically, politically, logically, and hence will fail to resolve a problem wherein one nation, Israel, wants peace with its neighbors, while its neighbors' publicly declared intentions are to utterly eradicate Israel and its Jews off the face of the earth.
Yes.
It is obvious that Kerry has not read the Bible or the Quran. And if he had, then he must be an extremely stupid man, since he has not understood the perfectly clear assertions and commandments made by God in the Bible, as well as by Allah in Muhammad's Quran. What I'm getting at is, in both books, the gods in both cases assert that the land of Israel belongs to the Israelites. Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims will never, ever bring this to the attention of the public. Why? Because it defeats their own agenda. And yet, I can prove it within less than 10 minutes based entirely on the verses of the Quran, as Muhammad recited them. Amazing, isn't it?
It is.
And of course, 100% Zionist.
Yeah. What is troubling about that, of course, is that the Quran is completely untrue. The Quran is nothing more than Muhammad's personal lust for sex, power, and money, and situational statements that he made that he attributed to his pretend God to satiate his lust for such things. That being the case, the Quran itself does say that Israel belongs to the Israelites. There is more to that statement, though, that I think that Eli Hertz has missed and that needs to be declared. This is what I said yesterday, and I'd like you to tell our listeners whether or not this is valid. He talks about the duration of the conflict, and there's this myth that the duration of the Muslim-Israeli conflict began in 1948 when Israel was given a homeland following the horror of the Holocaust. But that's not even remotely true. This conflict began, this conflict began when Muhammad fled Mecca following the satanic verses and the wild ass ride to Jerusalem in shame, and he went to Yathrib, where he changed his enemies from the Quraysh tribe in Mecca and made Jews his enemy, where he raped, murdered, enslaved, and robbed every Jew in the entire community.
This is a fact. It's not a conjecture. It's a fact as written by all the authorities, all the Bukhari, Muslim, Ibn Ishaq. These are the fundamentals of Islam. It is written in Arabic by the exegetes of Islam, and they tell you exactly what Muhammad did, and this is exactly what you just mentioned. He started war against not only the Jews, against all humanity. He unilaterally declared total war. When he went to Medina, chapter 9, Surah At-Tawbah, verse 5, the fighting verse, against all human beings who do not believe in him as a prophet and in his God, Allah. 1400 years ago. You're right. Nothing to do with 1948.
Yeah.
And the answer is wrong.
Yeah, it is sad in this regard. And this is not something that is just affirmed in the Hadith, which are the oral reports from Muhammad and his companions, but also in the Quran. The Quran itself affirms the eradication of the Jews. The Quran says that Allah participated in the acts of terrorism against them, in the killing of Jews, in the raping of Jews, in the enslaving of Jews. This has gone on for 1,400 years. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. I am Yahowah. We're here with IQ al-Rassooli. You can engage in this conversation by calling 877-300-7645. The second statement, IQ, reads as follows. When one admits the implications of Palestinian society's behavior, the repetitive pattern of over 90 years of rejectionism on the diplomatic front and the penchant for terrorism against civilians, the readiness of Arabs for coexistence and the chances of a breakthrough assume their true proportions. What's your response to that?
That's right. The people who celebrated 9/11, the destruction of and the Holocaust of 3,000 Americans, were the Palestinians. They were shouting and screaming and laughing and joking and throwing sweets at each other on 9/11. These are the same people whose governments, both in the West Bank, so-called West Bank, and in the Gaza, 24 hours a day, they indoctrinated the children to hate. Literally to hate, not just only the Jews, by the way. Israel is a red herring. Islam, it is so important Americans and other people understand something. Simple. Islam is against every human being who is not a Muslim. That's 80% of current humanity. It's nothing to do with the Jews.
Yeah.
The Jews in Israel is only the red herring, is the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, the
They're
Jews.
massacring Christians all over the Middle East, in Arab countries, as well in the Muslim countries. Today, 21st century, the most persecuted people on the planet are Christians by Muslims.
Yes, in fact, the Quran actually transitions from having the first 90 surahs universally attack the Arabs who didn't surrender to Muhammad. So any Arab who is not a Muslim is the first enemy of Islam. And there's 90 surahs devoted to besmirching them. And then of the next 24 surahs, those revealed in Yathrib, today's Medina, they transition enemies. They go from the Meccans who rejected Muhammad to Jews. And then after Jews had been overhunted, to Christians. So Islam is an equal opportunity hater. Anyone who does not agree with Islam was its first enemy, its second enemy were Jews, and its third enemy was Christians. So it's a fairly ubiquitous hater. I took a little different tactic to that statement. First of all, I made the point that there is no such thing as a Palestinian, something you and I have discussed. There is no place called Palestine. There is no such thing as a Palestinian. That is one of the greatest myths that has been perpetrated on humankind. The second is that they referred to this as a Palestinian society behavior for 90 years, but the myth of the Palestinians only arose in the 1960s. Even in the 1950s, there was really no mention of a Palestine or Palestinians because throughout most of the 1960s, you were dealing with the Jordanians controlling the West Bank and the Egyptians controlling Gaza. And so there was just no reason even to pretend there were such a people. The territory belonged to Egypt and Jordan, according to the Muslims. So even the timeline here is ridiculous.
Yeah, the irony of it is also another one. In all the United Nations resolutions,
right,
every single one of them speaks of Arab refugees, never the word Palestine. Not
correct.
Once.
Yes. Yeah, and
so if
what's
there
also
was people called Palestinians, the UN would have put it as Palestinians, but they never did. And there is no human being on planet Earth who can find the word Palestine as a state and Palestinians as a people anywhere in 6,000 years of recorded history prior to 1964.
Yeah, in fact, you've gone through the list of things that would all be required if there had been such a people in such a place, and none of them exist. The third item, third statement is the unwillingness to accept Israel as a legitimate non-Muslim political entity is epitomized by the so-called Palestinians' asymmetrical demands for the right of return of all, put it in quotes, Palestinian refugees to the Jewish state, coupled with the demand that the West Bank and Gaza be cleansed of all Jews. You, of course, see the hypocrisy there.
It's not only hypocrisy. I mean, it's unbelievable. They also don't mention that between 1948 and 1970, over 900,000 Jews from Arab countries, in my country, Iraq, we used to have the oldest Jewish community on the planet, the Babylonian Jews. 150,000 plus were made stateless. They didn't leave because they wanted to leave. The government of Iraq produced draconian rules similar to Nazi Germany.
Yes.
Who am I to say that? I'm Iraqi.
Yeah.
I speak Arabic. It's my country. I know what I'm talking about. And I dare anybody to come against me and debate me and prove me wrong.
Correct. It is pure hypocrisy, the so-called Muslim Palestinian position. We'll return with IQ al-Rassooli after the break. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. I'm here with IQ al-Rassooli. We're considering an article that was more sane, more rational than 99.999% of what you can read about the Land for Peace plan that is soon to be laid on the table and proposed by John Kerry. In fact, I wouldn't say proposed. I would say imposed, because the United States and Europe are telling Israel that you either accept this or we will boycott your nation and we will delegitimize Israel. So it's not being proposed. It is being imposed. This is the fourth statement that he made. It's a little longer than the others, but this is a statement that my guess is that you will embrace. True peace cannot be based on a lie. There has never been a cycle of violence. Resorting to such neutral terminology requires the United States to acquiesce and to perpetuate a gross misrepresentation of reality. Putting Israel and its neighbors on the same footing totally ignores the asymmetry of the history of the conflict and something as fundamental as cause and effect. The truth is, one side has been the aggressor time after time. The Arabs, we would say Muslims, have been the initiators of more than 5 major wars, political and economic boycotts, and unbridled incitement. The mythical people known as the Palestinians have launched wave after wave of terrorism against Israelis and other Jews and have made hate the fuel that directs and runs their society. All of this began before the State of Israel, before there was a quote-unquote occupation, and it continues unabated to this day.
May I add the following, and tell me if I'm wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Dear listeners, good intentions are no substitute to facts and reality. And tragically, tens if not hundreds of millions of people have perished unnecessarily due to totally misguided good intentions. I'll give you an example. World War II, when the Western democracies attempted to appease Hitler's insatiable military ambitions by betraying Czechoslovakia and handing her ignominiously as a sacrifice on the altar of good intentions. We are repeating the same, America is repeating the same thing with Kerry and Israel and the Palestinians.
Exactly. And it's going to be to exactly the same result. The result was then that by giving violent people, satiating them, in fact, encouraging them, it's interesting, Neville Chamberlain's The Sacrifice of the High Ground of Czechoslovakia versus the United States sacrificing the high ground of Israel. The thing that is so troubling about it is that when we now read the memoirs of those who served with Hitler, Hitler was on a very thin thread. His credibility had not yet been accepted by the military. He had established himself politically, but not militarily, in Germany. And it was the capitulation of Neville Chamberlain and the giving of the high ground of Czechoslovakia to Nazi Germany that cemented Adolf Hitler's position of authority in the German military. And so it is the same thing with Muslims today. The United States capitulation to Islamic terrorism, sacrificing Israel, is going to embolden them. And
it's not only the United Nations, Europe also. Ladies and gentlemen, it is unfortunate reality that the simplest truths and facts invariably escape the attention and or the intellect of most human beings. Let me explain something to you. Most of the people that we know of historically, such as the Babylonians, Assyrians, Greeks, Persians, Romans, have left their indelible mark on history, with their legacies of writing, their monuments, as well as being mentioned by their neighbors, enemies, or contemporaries.
Uh-huh.
Now, the Palestinian people, obviously, if they truly existed, should have also left their imprint and or are mentioned by others. If our academics, historians, politicians are so sure that Palestine and its people go back throughout most of recorded history, one would expect them to be able to answer a very few simple and basic questions about the alleged country of Palestine and its people, Palestinians. For example, when was the country of Palestine founded and by whom? Where did the Palestinian people originate from? What were Palestine's borders? Who were its neighbors? What language did the Palestinians speak? What writing did they use? What monuments did they leave? What temples did they leave? What was their religion? Who wrote about them, their neighbors? Who conquered them? Whom did they conquer? Ladies and gentlemen, these are simple questions. Not a single human being can answer a single one of these questions.
Correct.
To prove that there was a Palestinian people in existence. They don't.
Yeah. There was a fellow that ran for president of the United States he is a historian by background. His name is Newt Gingrich. He was actually leading in the Republican primaries for president the last time around. He was ultimately beaten by Romney. His campaign went from he was the leading candidate to he became a laughingstock when he made the comment that there is no such thing as a Palestinian people or a place called Palestine. And until we address the situation in Israel using facts as opposed to myths, there is no hope for peace. Him making that statement, which is absolutely true, destroyed his credibility in politics.
But how could it possibly destroy his politics? How could it be possible that he should have asked these questions from these people who are detracting him?
Well, he did respond that way. The problem is as follows, IQ. The vast preponderance of people are sheeple. They're easily misled. They are willing to believe the academicians, they're willing to believe the media, they're willing to believe their military, they're willing to believe their government, they're willing to believe their religion. And because they're willing to believe these things, they're willing to accept lies. And so when you get to a situation, IQ, where the vast preponderance of the world believes something to be true, most people accept it as true. The vast preponderance of the world believes that there is a place called Palestine and a people called Palestinians, because most people say it. And I consider it to be amongst the most debilitating myths in the world today. Because
isn't it remarkable?
Yes.
Hitler in Mein Kampf, Hitler in Mein Kampf in 1923 said exactly what you just said. Most people are stupid, and you give them a lie, and the bigger the lie, the more you repeat it, the more it becomes truth. And that's
right.
Exactly what Palestinian is.
Correct. It is an absolutely moronic lie that has been repeated so often, most people who are unwilling to think and to be reasonable have accepted it. And so they believe that Israel is occupying the land of the Palestinian people and that there needs to be a state of Palestine to bring peace to the region. But that myth, all that does is say that Israel has no right to exist. Because the moment you buy into the myth of Palestine, then Israel has no basis for existing, because the Muslims define Palestine as all of Israel. They don't define it as the West Bank and Gaza. They define it as all of Israel. So the moment you acquiesce and give them Palestine, they're going to say then their right is to control all of Israel, and it needs to be cleansed of the apes and swine, which the Quran defines as Jews.
You know, 99.99% of humanity doesn't know that the Balfour Declaration of 1917, regarding the return of the Jews from the diaspora to the land of their birth, also asserted the creation of what later turned out to be 22 Arab states that had no political existence under the heels of the Ottoman Empire. For example, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Palestine, Jordan, all these never existed.
Correct.
They were created by the West as part and parcel to give to the Arabs.
Yeah, they were created by Great Britain.
Under the heels of the Turks for 500 years.
Right. They were created by Great Britain because the British, I hate to use great in front of Britain, but they were created by the British because they had defeated the Ottoman Turks. And in the defeat of the Ottoman Turks, the empire of the Ottoman Turks was divided up into fiefdoms. The British rather liked royalty and fiefdoms, having had one that imposed its will on the Scottish and the Irish and the English for millennia. So they established fiefdoms. And what's so troubling about this is the Muslim fiefdoms all said, yeah, we accept, we want our own personal fiefdom. Thank you very much. And they said, but we will not tolerate you giving land to those dastardly Jews because our God hates the Jews. And then it's also interesting that that after the Holocaust, your Balfour Declaration was following World War I, and had it been honored, there would have been no Holocaust. But the British capitulated. They had no character, no sense of morality, and no backbone. And so the Holocaust occurred, and mainly because the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, the foremost Muslim spokesman in the world, came up with the idea of exterminating Jews as opposed to relocating them to Israel. That after the Holocaust, the United Nations in UN 242 came up with a homeland for the Jewish people that represented about 1/10 of the original amount of land that was part of the Balfour Declaration. And guess what? All of the Islamic fiefdoms that had been created from the Balfour Declaration rejected it. They immediately went to war against Israel. And now that they have lost 3 wars against Israel and have been routinely opposed to it, have never accepted it, they want it imposed on Israel because they have failed in their attempts to negate it. Now, how is that reasonable?
Using America, Kerry, and Europe to do the dirty work.
Right, because they failed.
Yes, but America is being complicit.
Of course.
Europe is being complicit. And the irony of this, even there is a greater irony. As we speak, Europe is inundated by Arabs and Muslims who are undermining the structure of European society.
Correct.
And the same thing is happening in America, and America is allowing Sharia law to exist on American soil.
Correct. Yep. We are destroying ourselves. We really have no one else to blame. But we are also aiding and abetting the destruction of Israel, and we ought not be doing that. We'll return after the break. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We're here with IQ, al-Rassooli. IQ, I have a series of questions from you. First, the realization is that you are from Iraq. You live in Europe. That's true, correct?
Correct.
All right. The United States and Europe collectively, primarily the United States, but with the backing of Europe, are trying to impose upon Europe, on Israel, the sacrifice of its high ground, the West Bank, for promises of peace from Muslims. Based upon what you know, do you think that the United States will be successful in this imposition? Do you believe that Israel will eventually capitulate to the United States and surrender the West Bank?
No chance in hell. Not in my opinion. Because by surrendering to what America is asking or demanding, it's committing suicide. Kerry said to the Israelis, if you don't accept peace, demographically you'll be all run over. Well, demographically, whether they accept peace or not, they're going to be inundated anyway, because 20% of the Israeli population today is Muslim.
Right. Right.
So really, they have no reason to accept anything Kerry gives them. Kerry does not understand Islam. Kerry does not understand the Middle East, and neither do the Europeans, even though they have had over 100 years of dealings with them.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to disagree with you here, and it's okay that we disagree on this. I'm convinced that Israel will eventually capitulate, and the reason is not the reason that Kerry has stated. Kerry has stated that if you do not capitulate and give up the West Bank, then you're going to be delegitimized as a nation, and every nation on the earth is going to boycott you, and therefore you're going to die financially. That's the reason Kerry is saying you will either accept this or you will cease to exist as a legitimate country. I think the reason is far more sinister. The primary merchant of death in the world today is the United States. We sell vastly more military equipment than the rest of the world combined. We are the primary supplier of weapons to Israel's enemies. We sold $70 billion just in one transaction to the Saudi Arabians last year. The United States sells 25 times more weapons to Israel's enemies than it does to Israel. And should the United States stop supplying spare parts and weapons to Israel at the rate of 25 to 1, Israel is destroyed. It's not in a position anymore where it can defend itself because it does not have an advantage. And so I think Israel will surrender.
Yeah,
I think they will capitulate.
I disagree with you. If I were Benjamin Netanyahu, if I were the leader of Israel and this happens, I would start a nuclear war.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. But if I were Benjamin Netanyahu...
No, you wouldn't do that. That's your choice.
Yeah.
I would do that because if I'm going to die, I'm going to have all those who are willing to destroy me to go with me. Before it happened.
It was the Saddam Hussein and Bashar al-Assad argument that I made. Said that if I were them and if they had chemical and biological weapons and the ability to launch them on ballistic missiles, then to invade and attack them and put them in a position where their only option is to go out in a blaze of demonic glory, then you'd be stupid to attack them. And with Netanyahu, if I were Netanyahu, I would not surrender the West Bank. If I was Netanyahu, I would not have surrendered Gaza for the reasons that you are stating. Let's say that I'm right and that Israel does capitulate because the pressure is too great, both financially and militarily, and that Israel recognizes that if we don't capitulate, it's certain death, and if we do capitulate, it's nearly certain death. If that were to occur, how long do you think it would take the Muslim nations to mount a universal attack on Israel?
A year, 2 years maximum.
Yeah. I think your 2 years is probably exaggerated. I think it's within a year. So I expect it to happen. Now, I expect it to happen for a different reason. I've already read about it. Do you know that in our program next week, I want to walk you through a most amazing set of prophecies and have you comment on them. But let me just summarize the chronology for you. It's from the 17th chapter of a book known as Isaiah. The author is actually Yahowah through Yahshua. He begins by saying that Damascus will be destroyed. It will be a heap of rubble. So the destruction of Damascus is the key that begins this series of events. That as a result of that, Israel will be thinned at its waist, at its midsection, so that it is no longer viable as a country. And then the result of that is that Muslims ravage the place, destroying everything in their path.